Welcome to the Zeducation podcast, where it's all about helping people and organizations unleash their greatness. Hosted by me, Pasi and my brother,
that's me, Kalolo Halfano.
The Zeducation podcast features lively discussions.
When they share it, you see that they're beginning to feel empowered.
My heart, it's full of pride for me to be at Maitai Samoa.
As well as tips on leadership and business by some of the top minds and influencers around the world.
You don't necessarily need a degree these days. There's so many pathways to success.
Welcome to the Zeducation podcast.
Welcome to the Zeducation podcast, where our mission is to unleash greatness for learners in education. And very grateful for us to come on here and talk about a very important topic that I think is very relevant to what we're doing today.
Yeah, I love what we do at Zeducation. You know, we're about the learner, but we're also about the employer. We're all about helping businesses grow by growing their people. They're the most important asset in any business. But on this specific episode, I'm excited because I get to interview my brother, Kalolo. It's a little bit different. Normally, we're bouncing back and forth here, but today's an interview because Kalolo at Zeducation looks after the learning and the design aspect of training programs. He helps us serve our clients by finding out what they need and then building, in terms of instructional design, building training programs that help upskill their staff and achieve those objectives for their business.
And as much as we are a training organization, what we've come to realize is many of our clients and work we've done in the past 2.5 years has been around the creation of learning programs. And that's been a big bread and butter at Zeducation. And what better way than for us to share our tips and tricks on how to make it effective and very human-centered.
Yeah, because not many people know that we do design programs. We can, bespoke, based on your needs. Yes, we do delivery or facilitating, and we can help scale whatever you got, your training programs or our existing ones, but we also help our clients build programs from scratch as well to help achieve their objectives. But let's get right into it.
Let's get
into it. So in terms of instructional design, for people who might not be quite familiar with it, it's a terminology that's used in the industry for designing training programs. We don't design learning, we design training programs, right? So maybe define what instructional design is and why it's so important.
Yeah. In pragmatic terms or practical terms, instructional design is designing a program that is centered on the learners in achieving the objectives of the educational journey. So I love the term itself, instructional design, because the word instruction kind of gives very process-based, and then design allows for a bit of creativity. So with those two words put together, it's really great to see that we're able to build programs that help truly unleash the greatness of these learners when they leave the course.
And why is it so important for businesses to consider this instructional design?
All too often, a lot of businesses really focus on off-the-shelf programs. Don't get me wrong, they work, right? And there are so many programs that we have at Zeducation that has been tested and true. And when we apply it in the workplace, it really achieves great objectives. But on a good, better, best scale, the best approach is to really figure out what your organizational issues are and building a bespoke program from there and seeing how it can help achieve and measure the productivity, growth, and the sentimental growth within the individual themselves. I think that is the best approach, and that's where many organizations have reached out to Zeducation and asked us to help solve those issues.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than putting a staff or a learner through a training program that benefits them in no way. It doesn't help them do better in their job. It doesn't help them do better in their lives because it's not relevant. So I love what you spoke about there in terms of the starting point should be assessing what the needs are. And that's why it's important, because every business is different in terms of what they need.
As Zeducation, when we design programs for our clients, we use a instructional design model that stands true and is very popular in this day and age. And it's called the ADDIE model. So the ADDIE model is a process or an engineering process that'll help you create a program that'll help unleash the greatness of your learners. It's a very human or student-centered approach. So ADDIE stands for analyze, design, develop, implement what you've built, and then also evaluate at the end.
I love that. So there's a bit of a design process in terms of the engineering of it that keeps the human at the center. And that's why you start with the needs assessment, is what is the needs of the individual or the people that you're trying to upskill. Then you build a program going backwards from there. So I love that. It keeps the human at the center of it. So my question is, so obviously you've got this model. How do you make sure that you're on the right track? So when you're designing this program, where are the checkpoints to ensure that throughout the design process that you're on par?
Yeah, very good question. As much as this general framework of a 5-step process for ADDI is something that we use in education, what behind it is stepping stones towards achieving each and every step. So I think in making sure that we checkpoint and know that this is working effectively, number one, from an analyze perspective, or assessment, like you've mentioned in the beginning stages, make sure you gather all the necessary data and problems, really ascertain and listen to what the needs are of the business. Maybe it might require that you talk to the employee, HR, senior leadership team, as well as the managers that are looking after the staff, to ascertain what those needs are. Another checkpoint too is making sure that whoever's in the design phase really understands learning science. What are the learning outcomes? What are the learning objectives? How are you going to measure those objectives? Really understanding the skeleton of how a program should work, especially the learning objectives, is going to help checkpoint and really understand if you're going to achieve the objectives of the program. And also, as you obviously develop and implement, evaluation is also very crucial. So evaluation is where you checkpoint and understand, well, actually, is this program working? Is my students actually coming out from this program and achieving the objectives and the outcomes, right? So from an engineering perspective, that's why it's so crucial to follow the structure, because this structure will help you understand how the learner is going to be centered in all of it.
Awesome. So thank you. So you've walked us through the framework, and there's a bit of a process behind it, and there's a reason why it keeps the human at the center of it, and make sure that the training program is good quality and it is actually impacting the pain points. It's doing what it's supposed to be doing. So maybe take us into the design phase of that process when you're designing the program or the instruction. How do you develop or design a training program that is sticky, that the learner gets a really good experience in terms of how the program is delivered, the approach? How do you make it a good experience? When a person is designing the training program, what do they need to consider for that?
Very good question. In the analyze phase, you should always remember who your audience is. Are they a team of office workers? Are they frontline staff with low literacy and numeracy? So really gauging and understanding who your audience is will really help you craft an effective program or design an effective program. Let's take into, for example, frontline staff with low literacy and numeracy. That's a very common one for us. Once we understand who the audience is, then we can design and say, okay, the assessments that's going to help achieve the objective. So for those that don't know what the learning objectives are, which is crucial in the learning space, is by the end of this session or this course, the student is able to do this. What is it? So that's why the learning objectives are crucial. But in order for you to achieve those objectives, what most learning development specialists do is they follow this other framework called Bloom's taxonomy. So Bloom's taxonomy is a pyramid of different levels of ways to achieve learning objectives. So, for example, right at the bottom, for those that are in low literacy numeracy, you might want them to just remember what they want. So, remember the things that they've learned in the course. The second step is understand. Third is apply. And then as you go further up, it's analyze, evaluate, and create. But from a foundational level for low literacy numeracy, we want them to remember, understand, and apply. So building learning objectives from those three key pillars will help you know, okay, this is my audience, and this is how I'm going to design this program. So all too often, what many people do is they'll go, okay, here are the learning objectives. I'm very happy with the learning objectives for this program. Let's go straight into teaching learning activities. So what am I going to do in my class for the facilitator to help achieve those objectives? My recommendation is those that are creating the learning objectives should then go straight into the learning assessments. How are you going to measure these objectives? Once you really understand what those assessments are, or I don't really like the word assessments, tasks, right? Assessments has a bit of a trauma for a lot of people. Exams even, but it's a very traumatic word for a lot of people as well. Is once you know what the tasks are to measure the objectives, then you're good to go to create the teaching learning activities, right? So following that step in the design phase will help you build a beautiful skeleton to therefore go into the third step, which is develop.
Yeah. So basically, what I'm hearing is what they need to consider is obviously the learning outcomes, the objectives, and making sure that it's relevant for the end user. So when you're designing this program, think about how they would receive it, and if the learning objectives are actually relevant to their job or to what's important to them, right? Because that would be an awesome program that will motivate them. It's like, what's in it for me? How will I benefit from this program? And the learning objectives can help, and the outcomes can help define that. And so I think the other thing from my perspective is if you're designing the training program, don't forget the why. Don't forget the why. It's not just about ticking a box. It's not about just, here, my manager told me, just handed me a project or an assignment to deliver this type of training, and then you just go away, do it. No, remember the why. These training programs are supposed to impact these people's lives and help them become not just better in their jobs, but become better family members, become better citizens, become just overall a better person. So, expand your horizons and think about that. Like, these training programs, how will impact their families as well, or their children. So you got to think beyond the horizon in terms of just like, this is a training program. These are the skills that we need to develop. These are the learning objectives. So when you're designing this, there's meaning behind it. Don't forget the why.
Yeah. And as much as there's all these steps to achieve this or that, it cultivates a lifelong culture of learning, right? We're in this day and age that regardless of what age you are, you should be learning day by day.
I love that. I love that you mentioned culture of learning. And I think that's another thing that you need to assess in terms of the assessment stage when you're defining the needs is maybe try and understand the culture. How is learning perceived in the workplace? How do employees perceive learning in the workplace? Because you might develop this awesome training program, and when it comes time to roll out, no one cares about it. No one wants it because it's never been a part of the culture. No one loves learning there. They just want to come, clock their ticket, do their job, and they're out. That's it. I didn't come here for school or anything like that. So, what is the culture like? Assess that as well. Not just what the skill needs are, but the perception of learning as well.
Yeah, and we often pick that up quite early in the stages of ADDIE through assessment, right? We know organizations aren't perfect. Some are still in that new space of, okay, how do I cultivate that culture of learning? But it's all about desire. And for those that reach out to Zeducation to help build programs, the desire is already there. But yeah, you're right. All organizations should start developing this, and it should be a pervasive, positive thing.
Yeah, so we deal with a lot of clients who want bespoke programs or custom-built training programs for their staff and their needs. And a lot of them have a deadline as well. So they know when they want to start rolling out the training programs. And so we start working backwards from there. Okay, cool. So the training program and the resources need to be ready by this specific date. So there's also that time constraint or that deadline that people need to work towards. So maybe my question is, how do you build a program that's at least good enough to start and ready? How do you get it to that stage? Because we could spend all day designing, researching, and building a training program, and we may never be ready to go out there if we're waiting for perfection. Right. So maybe talk a little bit about that. How do we get, when you're designing and building the training program, at least get it ready for the deadline?
Yeah, I would say that nothing is ever perfect when you implement in the ADDIE phase. That's why it's a loop, and you need to evaluate, reiterate. It's the lean startup model. So just go in. It may not be perfect when you design, but as long as you're implementing and getting the feedback from the learners themselves and measure that is going to help you effectively and efficiently find the best ways of building something successful. In fact, there have been many other models that have been built from Eddie. Eddie is like the mother figure of all models when it comes to instructional design, such as SAM. So SAM is a very common model today where you build a program really quick and you just reiterate, right? On the spot, okay, this is not working, change. So it's like a lean startup model type of approach. And that works, especially as you wanting to navigate and just build really quick within time constraints. However, my recommendation for organizations is not to think short or medium term with these type of programs. That's where you need to step back and think strategically how you're going to implement a culture of learning, which means that it is long term. For example, Rome wasn't built in a day, right? These students lives are going to change overnight straight away. You can't expect a seed to grow into a tree overnight by throwing a whole bunch of water on it. So there needs to be a strategic lens in making sure that when you build programs, you see the outcomes of these students maybe 6 months, maybe 12 months past the program that they've gone through the journey of. And I think that's probably what's very important. So yes, I understand there are time constraints, but navigating a long-term approach and how these are stacked up to unleash the individual and get them to progress in their career.
I love that. So you got to think long term. So any training program that you develop, if you're working towards a deadline or time constraint, just keep in mind that it doesn't have to be perfect, and don't rush it either. But obviously, you'll launch something that's pretty decent, but always keep in mind that improvement is an ongoing process. And like Kalolo mentioned, you got to have those checkpoints, get feedback, ask the students from an empathetic point of view, hey, we hope this program was going to do this. How did you find it? So you can get that information, that data that you need to continue to improve the training program and the instructional design. And, like Kalolo talked about, maybe there's those checkpoints, but there's a framework out there that's really simple. It's called start, stop, and continue. You just, those 3 simple questions. What do we, based on the feedback, what do we need to start doing? What do we need to stop doing? And what's working that we need to continue to do? Just those 3 simple questions. Start, stop, and continue. Those are good ways to evaluate the training program and to keep improving it over time.
Yeah, and that made me think of the last part of the Eddie model, which I believe is probably the most important, and that is the evaluation phase. In fact, the framework that we use at Zeducation for our clients is a 4-layered Kirkpatrick's model that helps you understand what is a good, better, best, and the bestest approach when it comes to evaluating. So Kirkpatrick's model, I think, is so good, and I think it should be implemented for all L&D. And that is, how am I going to evaluate the student's progression from this program? Well, the first level 1 is reaction. So how do I gather the reaction from the educational program? The second is learning, right? So learning can come in the form of, okay, as they achieve these assessments, they're going to achieve the course. So that's great. We're getting an evaluation from them doing formative and summative assessments. These 2 approaches are the easiest, right? Level 1 and 2, so reactions from the course and the learning data from the course is easy. 3rd and 4th levels, number 3 is behavior. So after the program, how are you going to measure the behavior and if actually they're going to change? And this requires where you check up on them maybe 6 months down the track, right? Or a checkpoint on maybe a month, a year later, right? And understand if they're actually learning and implementing continuously what they've learned from that program. That's why as Zeducation, we've been thinking from this model how mobile learning can really help reiterate the importance of that and also community. But the most effective evaluation is return on investment, right? What are the KPIs of the business, right? And how are you going to evaluate those KPIs back to the educational program? Those key performance indicators in the business and evaluating that, well, all this money or pute that I'm putting towards this educational journey, is this a good ROI, right? Is this going to be results-driven, a results-driven program? And from an evaluation perspective, on a good, better, best scale, it's actually better to go straight to work backwards, okay? So what are your key performance indicators in your business? What are the behaviors that we need to measure in order to achieve that? What's the learning activities to help achieve the behaviors in the ROI? And then also, what's the reaction that we want from the program? So the Kirkpatrick's model is so crucial for us because as much as the whole model that we use for Eddie works, it's the evaluation that's going to help create a long-term strategy. And that's why I'm a believer that if anyone wants to partner with education, think long-term, because we can only truly measure return on investment if we build these programs to help develop not only a culture of learning, but a return on investment, not only for your staff, but also for them to take that knowledge back home and change their lives.
Absolutely. You want a training program that actually helps achieve the business's overall strategic objectives as well, help the employees upskill and also improve their lives, not just improve their work. So just as we draw nearer to the end of the podcast, I just want to ask a few more questions, just going to get some more value here. Talk a little bit about AI and how that can be a useful tool for instructional design.
It makes it definitely efficient in the sense that you can prompt ChatGPT, for example, or maybe Bard for those that are Google supporters, to prompt to be an expert in the learning and development space. Once you have it prompted to be set up in that aspect, then really provide that data to it on some of those needs that are existing in your workplace. So, for example, it's as much as you can use your brain to really figure out, okay, here are the problems of this organization. I'm going to think of ways to build a program, and that might take quite a long time. Whereas ChatGPT or artificial intelligence can really extract those problems and say, hey, here are the key modules that you need to teach in this class. And it might be very different to what we had originally thought, even though we're experts in this space. We'd be like, oh yeah, we should talk about grit and the importance of grit and how persistence, even through obstacles, will lead to success. So ChatGPT or artificial intelligence really opens the lens for us to really think more than just what our human minds may have. And it's really helped us build much more high quality programs for sure.
And as long as you've got the learning objectives and the outcomes and the needs all defined and assessed, then, whatever AI gives you helps you, or wherever you find the information, AI is just good at finding and research and collecting data for you, but helps keep it relevant at the end of the day. So as long as you've done the upfront work, everything that you do afterwards makes it relevant, if you connect it back. And so AI is a great tool. It shouldn't be the only tool that you use. There's just keep in mind that there's other tools out there. AI is just one of them. And I also liked the thinking about the learning experience for the user as well. So think about the end user. So AI is good at finding the what information, but the design, the beauty of it, comes to the how. So taking the information, the what, making it relevant and making it exciting and engaging for the learner, that's where the beauty of instructional design comes in, and making sure that the training program is sticky and actually impacts and improves those pain points within the business.
Yeah, I'm currently working on a project right now with my team on a big instructional design booklet for a client. And as much as we are using AI to help us build a good quality program, I'm still using my critical thinking and problem-solving skills and writing skills to help adjust and refine. So I don't think that AI is fully taking over instructional design at this time. It still requires a level of human engagement.
Awesome. So thank you so much, Kalolo, for all of that. I'm just going to ask one more question before we end it, but I just wanted to highlight that you're doing an awesome work here. You've mentioned that we're working with a big project at the moment for a client, but we've worked on multiple projects, multiple clients, and we've built training programs with your help. Programs like home ownership, teaching people home ownership and getting them into homes. We've helped 7 people get into their homes because of that awesome program that you've built. Helped them upskill on financial well-being. Some people have stopped drinking, smoking, and that, which has helped them save not only money but save their lives. So we know there's a lot of value in the impact that we're making at Zeducation with all these training programs that you've helped build for us. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, especially as a brother, but also as a CEO. But, what are some final tips that you'd love to share that people need to consider when they're building training programs or instructional design? Some final tips.
Yeah. First, Ngamhi to you. Thank you so much for sharing that. I mean, as we navigated and started growing this business, I think we were right from the get-go, our ngako or our heart was towards unleashing greatness for our learners, and particularly for Māori Pasifika. But my final tip for everyone is And I'm drawing attention to organizations, those that own businesses, that are the kaitiaki over employees or many staff, is to gain a desire of lifelong learning that you would want to implement in your business. Majority of our lives are working, and we don't just say we're going to go and learn from up until tertiary at university and that's it. Well, actually, learning in the workplace is also crucial as well. Not only for their professional objectives and productivity objectives, but also for the students themselves to actually take that learning and to grow personally and sentimentally. So my biggest tip is to have a desire, especially those that are at the top that are leading these organizations.
Well, that's where it all starts, right? It starts with the desire and it starts with the leaders. So thank you so much for sharing those tips and values and insights around instructional design and building training programs that's really sticky and really impactful. Thank you so much. So thank you for joining us on our podcast, Zeducation podcast. Here always, the Halfano brothers, always here to serve, help you to grow your business by growing your people. Malo pito.
Kia pai tō rā.